According to new market research, looks like workers are by and large not really happy on the job, and it's causing a little bit of conflict in the workplace. Uh, Sounds like a you problem. Hey folks, Mark here from The Rational Workforce, a brand new YouTube channel where we take a look at the news, events, and opinions that are shaping the world of work, specifically through an employee and employer standpoint. I'm your host. I'm really glad you're here today. You know, there's an interesting report that just came out in the Wall Street Journal that's highlighting a Gallup study that shows worker engagement. That's basically a measure of how much employees are kind of plugged into and involved with their job, is at an all-time low. And it's causing some conflicts in the workplace. It's causing some conflicts with management. And, you might not want to hear it, but as an employee, you got to own some of this stuff too. So let's dig into the article. Let's take a look at what we're talking about. So again, this is from the Wall Street Journal. First, it was quiet quitting. Now workers are facing off with their bosses. And if you go down and read the article, half of workers aren't engaged on the job, putting in a minimal effort to get by, according to research by Gallup. Employee engagement, which is a measure of involvement and enthusiasm at work in the U.S., has declined for the second year in a row. There is also a growing share of the workforce that is disengaged or resentful that their needs aren't being met. In some cases, these workers are disgruntled over low pay and long hours, or they have lost trust in their employers. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit first. So, in any relationship, it could be a marriage, it could be a friendship, it could be a work relationship. It is very much a two-way street, right? So if you feel like you're not being valued at work, if you feel like you're not making enough, if you feel like you're not being treated properly, absolutely the employer needs to make sure they're creating an environment where people get a fair shake, where it's not hostile, all of that stuff. There are laws and policies and regulations around that. We know it goes sideways sometimes. We know it. But this could also be a clear indication for you as an employee that maybe you've outgrown the role. Maybe you're frustrated with the role. Maybe you're tired with the type of work you're doing, and it could be time for a change. You know, it can't always be on the employer to make the changes to accommodate your lifestyle, right? And as you grow in a position, as you grow as a person, your needs and demands and your wants change. And that's great. That's important. And that's the way things should be. But from an employer standpoint, there's work that needs to be done. You know, sometimes that work doesn't change or evolve or grow as quickly as you would like to. And when those things don't align, that's where this conflict starts to pop up. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the article, and we'll see some of the things that they're highlighting. They talk about certainly how it started growing in and around COVID, and how it's starting to spike more after that. But I wanted to highlight a couple of areas here. So this working on trust, I think, is important to talk about. Many employees see shifts away from flexible schedules and remote work options as a signal that executives don't trust them to do their jobs outside of the office. We know there are some leaders that feel that way. There might be some other motivations for things like return to work and stuff like that. We'll talk about in a minute. Others say benefits to remote work they experienced during the pandemic, including more time with family and cutting back commutes, are now critical to happiness. The employers making more in-office work a requirement are in part motivated by trying to bolster workers' loyalty, which they correlate with longer retention, said Katie George, a senior partner and chief people officer at McKinsey & Company. Okay, let's stop there and unpack that a little bit. So, do some managers have trust issues that work isn't being done? I'm sure of it. Absolutely, right? I've worked with folks like that in the past. I've tried not to be that leader when I was an executive, but we know what happens out there. However, that's not the only reason why your employer or your manager might be driving you to come back to work. And there's a couple dynamics there. One is that no matter how much you have gotten used to, or how much your lifestyle has encompassed work from home. There are some environments, there are some jobs where actually being in the office is a benefit in terms of camaraderie, in terms of collaboration, in terms of, just being able to stand up and get around a whiteboard and try to problem solve. Sometimes that's easier in person. And look, I have been a work from home employee before it was cool. One of my longest tenures is I was actually in an executive role at a company where I worked remotely, as did the lion's share of my workforce. Now, I created opportunities like on a quarterly basis for us to get together for a few days and make sure that we're getting that face time, because I feel as a leader that that's important. I feel like that is a necessary way to make sure that you're galvanizing bonds between team members. And look, if there were folks on my team that didn't like that or didn't agree with that, that was always a conversation, but ultimately it was on them to decide whether they wanted to stay or go, because that was the way that I needed to run things from an effective team standpoint. Now, COVID changed a lot of the rules, and I totally get that, but managers and employers and workplaces now starting to create these come into the office policies. It's not always ulterior motives that are motivating them. There are instances where that's just the way the workplace is going to go. So, if you're wrestling with that, if you're feeling some of those challenges, don't always jump to ascribing negativity or lack of trust there. Now, a completely different situation is if you were hired with the expectation that you were going to be working remote, and now you're being asked to come into the office. That's an old bait and switch. I don't like that. I've been on the receiving end of similar bait and switches before, not that precise one, but that feeling of, hey, look, I signed up for ABC and now you're forcing me to do XYZ. That is absolutely, unquestionably a curveball that your employer is throwing at you. That's on them. And the resentment that you may be feeling is 100% understandable, but it's also something that can't fester. You need to have those direct conversations. Now, if you are part of a workplace that has always had, in-office work with maybe the occasional work from home, and now they're shifting directions and they want that work from office to come back again, but your lifestyle has changed, your priorities have changed to the point where you now have working from home as an absolute critical need for you. Is that a case of the company changing or you changing, right? And no question, companies need to keep up with the times if they want to keep good talent. And if you're driving that much talent for your organization, but they're insisting that you come to the office or there's going to be a problem, then maybe you sign it's not the right workplace for you, right? And that employer will learn quickly enough that those kind of draconian measures are not going to provide them the best talent, and they'll pay the price in the marketplace. And the marketplace is a wonderful way of forcing change where it's necessary. But in terms of your own sanity, in terms of your own personal growth, in terms of your own, mental health and well-being, yeah, it might be time to do something like this gentleman here did. So this is Kyle Pfluger. Kyle, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. 34 years old, was hired in 2020 to work remotely as a product manager. He met his coworkers in person just a few times over the years and never felt fully connected to his work or colleagues. But as the breadwinner for his family, he needed the pay, the retirement benefits, and the health insurance. But Pfluger left his full-time job this month to focus on independent projects. I wasn't feeling particularly happy with the work that I was doing, he said. He now works full-time for himself, including building and maintaining websites for a business. So there we go. There's, and Kyle, that's a big step, man. So good for you. But it's an example of someone who is recognizing that what they were doing is no longer what's fulfilling for them, and they're making a positive change to make that happen. And that's so important. That's vital to do. And I understand that not everyone's in a position where they can do that. I'm a dad of three. Two of those three are in college, and the decision to go out on my own and start my consultancy Kickmotor, or even to ramp up this channel, It's not an easy decision. You've got to make sure that you're really kind of looking at all the angles, and it could all end tomorrow. Who knows? But it was absolutely the right thing for me to do. I'm 4 years in now and can't imagine doing anything else. But you'll come to these points in your life where things change, and sometimes it's on you to make that change. So good for Kyle. I also want to highlight there's another example from this article that I think is emblematic of a manager who absolutely gets it. So this is Michelle Spielberg Hart. Again, hope I'm not butchering your name, Michelle. She directs marketing for a Boston area health nonprofit. And she said that she has told her staff to take time off when they aren't feeling well mentally or physically. Their work isn't life or death, and taking breaks can help people come back with more energy and better ideas, she said. This is critical. They cannot do good work and be healthy if they're not taking care of themselves first. And if you don't take care of yourself, nobody else will. Michelle, kudos. Awesome, awesome management philosophy. And, that is very much part of what a good manager needs to do, is to recognize that team and understand when individuals may be having a hard time, when they might need some extra time off. And also they might need a nudge to do that. I remember one scenario when I was working for that same company where I was working remotely. Had an amazing team member I had several amazing team members, but there were a couple in particular that were just consistently, working their butts off, long hours. I wasn't asking them to put in this ridiculous amount of time, but they felt so passionately tied to the work they were doing that they always wanted to make sure that it was a great output. And B, they just like me, they loved the business. They were dedicated to it. And there were times when I physically had to close laptops and say, it's time to wrap up your day, or you're really stressed out. You need to go get some time off. They also were comfortable enough where they could tell me, look, Mark, our workload is killing us. We need more people, or we need different prioritization. And having that relationship with your team, having that relationship with your manager is really, I think, more than anything else, what makes or breaks an organization and their ability to succeed. And it governs how back to work and things, other workplace notices like that are perceived, right? If you've got a great relationship with your manager, if you have that opportunity to have those open discussions and can state what you need and you're given it in return, that's what everybody should be aiming for. And, I do a lot of work in the HR technology community, and there's 1,000,001 silver bullets and easy buttons that people are touting out there as this will fix engagement like that. This will make your employees fall in love with you again and just want to give you 1,000%. There is absolutely nothing that replaces having a good one-on-one relationship with your manager, and as a manager, understanding what makes your people tick. Not what the 50 people you may manage that do this function think and feel, but what on an individual basis people feel. And if you're in an executive role and you're not putting in managers who are investing the time to develop those one-on-one relationships to understand what makes people tick, then you need to maybe take a look at that management structure. Going back to an employee's responsibility, what you can't do is sit in a role day after day where you're dialing it in, where you're unhappy, and when you're letting that unhappiness spill out into other things, right? You've got to take responsibility to a large degree for your own happiness and your own career growth. So if you're not getting what you need out of your employer, and maybe some great training will take care of it, speak up about it, right? Be vocal, but don't be negative, because as much as it is important for you to voice your frustrations, preferably behind closed doors with a manager and not out in a broad meeting or in front of a team, but to have those discussions, it's important. And then based on that interaction, you can see whether you want to stay or whether you want to go. But the number one thing that will damage your career, and as someone who's been at this for nearly 30 years, I can tell you that the way you behave in good times and in bad is absolutely going to have an impact on your career trajectory as a person. That doesn't mean if you're a hothead, you know, and you get passionate about what you do and you make a mistake and you speak out. That's not the death knell for your career. You know, people change, people evolve, people learn from their mistakes. I'm not saying that, but you know, with my consultancy with Kickmotor, a really big chunk of my business comes from people that I've worked with. I had a call yesterday with a really good friend and good colleague that we worked together almost 20 years ago. And they're in different positions and points in their career now where they're calling me up and they're giving me business. We have opportunities to work together again. And if I was in stressful situations in that job, even though we were peers, and I acted in such a way that was negative or poisoned the workplace, that's a reflection on me. It's a reflection on me, and it's baggage you don't want to carry around as an employee. So anyway, there's a lot to unpack there. I get it. These are interesting times that we're navigating, both as employees and as employers, as executive and as managers, as consultants. There's a lot to take in. But just remember, it's always a two-way street. It's always a two-way street. And like my dad used to tell me when I would complain that I didn't feel valued at work, he said, you know what? Your boss sends you a thank you note every 2 weeks, signed in the lower right-hand corner. Don't expect more than that. You won't be upset. There's some wisdom in those words. Maybe a little hyperbolic to make a point, but take responsibility for your own career and your own happiness, and you'll never go wrong. With that, I thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoy what you've been seeing over the past couple weeks since we launched. Click like, ring the bell, leave a comment. Let me know what you want to hear more of, and we will catch you tomorrow. Thanks again. Have a great day.